Okay, start.
Well, welcome everybody. And this evening, pardon me, for me, it's this evening, and I know for folks there, it's late afternoon or late morning, pardon me. I'd like to introduce two of our speakers, two prominent individuals. First, we're going to hear from an anthropologist, an eminent anthropological geneticist, Dr. Ravi Duggrala, who is the MMCF Endowed Professor in Diabetes Research at the Department of Human Genetics. That is at the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley School of Medicine. And we're going to hear a bit about, I think, anthropological opportunities. We also are honored to be joined by Dr.Monika Setia, who is working as the regional officer, Hyderabad, with the United States India Education Foundation, which she joined at the beginning of 2018, following 12 years working in the education industry. She did her doctorate at Penn State in the United States in 2010. Monika worked as a research fellow at Duke and US Graduate Medical School in Singapore. She moved back to India in 2011 to work with Public Health Foundation of India at one of their sister institutes, the Indian Institute of Public Health, as an assistant professor until 2016. The following year, she began work as the regional manager, counseling and educational services with ELS, International Education Pathways, in Hyderabad, before joining USIEF. Monika believes that exposure to high quality education, research, and professional systems allows individuals to imbibe the culture, values, and knowledge from the environment, leading to their personal, academic, and professional growth. Having pursued her graduate degree from a U.S. institution as an international student, and having studied and worked in the Indian education system, she's passionate about working on exchange of students, scholars, and professionals between the United States and India. So without further ado, I would like to turn over the floor to my esteemed colleague, Dr. Duggrala. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dean. First of all, I would like to this opportunity to greet, all our colleagues, friends, and students at Andhra University and elsewhere. It's a great pleasure, to be part of the National Anthropology Congress, Anthropology for India, being hosted by Andhra University Department of Anthropology. I am very proud to say that it's my alma mater. I spent lots of years there in the Department of Anthropology, being trained by my teacher, late Dr. Bhaskara Garu. And thank you to AAH, and as well as American Corner, as well as the Department of Anthropology, hosting important meeting together. It's very important meeting, and I am not actually not listed as a speaker. I'm co-chair for this session, and to hear a lot from Dr. Monika Setia. Like me and Dr. Bart, Dr. Satia was here in the US, and she had been exposed to the culture here, and she was in India. And we are going to listen to Dr. Satia to learn much about these cultural exchange experiences between these two countries, as well as, of course, she was in other places also. So actually, the focus of this particular session is to learn about your 5 steps to PhD programs in the United States. I would like to share a few things with the permission of the chair, Dr. Dean, and also Dr. Setia, please give me a few minutes, so that I can talk about how important is anthropology, how rich is the field of anthropology. As you all know, it's a very, very multifaceted, field. It's a unique field that tries to look at the different aspects of, humans and their rich experiences. It's a wonderful field. I did my first master's. How wonderful it is. I will just give you some glimpses of my own career. I did my first master's in human genetics and physical anthropology at Andhra University. Then I moved to the United States. To my surprise, I did my second master's in cultural anthropology. I thought that it would be very, very important before we put our finger into genetics of human populations. It would be very, very important to learn about the populations and their cultural attributes and their linguistic affiliations, so that we can put all these pieces together to understand human variation and evolution at the macro level or at the micro level. Okay. Then once I finished my cultural anthropology master's, I thought that I should do something uniquely, in the field of biological anthropology. There, I was trained by a world-renowned professor of anthropological genetics, Dr. Michael Crawford. It was a privilege for me, and I'm honored, to be his student. And I was trained by him, and Dr. Dean knows him very well. And what I thought is, since I represent both cultural anthropology and human genetics, I should choose something about a unique population. I chose, it was suggested by my mentor. I worked on the genetic and environmental or cultural influences on lipids and lipoproteins in a unique population called the Mennonites. They are cultural isolates. It's one of the largest groups of Anabaptist groups, in the United States. And my study population came from the Midwestern states of Nebraska and Kansas. So once I finished my PhD in cultural anthropology and biological anthropology, then I thought my life, because I worked on lipids and lipoproteins, my advisor suggested that I should go to a medical school to pursue my postdoctoral fellowship. Uniquely, again, with my anthropological background, I ended up working with, again, a world-renowned person. His name is Professor Michael Stan. He is an expert in epidemiology and genetic epidemiology of complex diseases such as diabetes, obesity, heart disease. And he chose for those studies one of the largest ethnic minority populations in the United States called the Hispanics. They're also called, the major portion of Hispanics are Mexican Americans. Mexican Americans, they have ancestral background coming from three populations, mostly European and Native American. A little bit of African component is also there in their genetic architecture, in their genetic background. So why a minority population to look at genetics of complex diseases? The minority populations, you all know that socioeconomic status plays a major role. Cultural differences plays a major role. Minority status within a cosmopolitan society, it also plays a major role. So we started looking at the environmental and genetic basis of diabetes, obesity, heart disease, gallbladder disease, a variety of diseases that are associated with the type 2 diabetes in this unique population of Mexican Americans coming from the city called San Antonio, Texas. So since then, we have been conducting a variety of studies in each and every step throughout my career. I would be seeing pieces of anthropology coming back into my mind. For example, when we conduct these humongous, genetic studies, the first step we do is human subjects recruitment. To be able to recruit Mexican Americans, you should have solid knowledge in their cultural background and their language, and to be able to associate with them or to be able to interact with them, we should be able to have some people representing their community as part of our research team so that we can reach the population and explain to them what we are doing and go ahead, with our projects. It has been a great experience interacting with them. Language is important, culture is important, what they eat is important, what they do is important, because we are dealing with complex diseases that are influenced by both genetic and environmental factors, cultural attributes, So that is how my entire career has started. And something happened, to the video. I don't know what happened, but I will go ahead, with my talk. And I will give you another example. Dr. Dean by himself is an example. Dr. Dean, he's a cultural anthropologist. Currently, he's heading a project in Peru looking at diabetes status in the Peruvian native populations. So there are no boundaries, to the subfields of anthropology. It's a very multifaceted study of, humans and human experiences. We'll have to have multi-pronged approach, to be able to understand the underlying factors of these complex diseases. That's where I will stop. My experience in the United States as a foreign student, as a foreign person, has been fantastic. There are no hurdles here. The people are wonderful. The teachers are great. And everything, that I have been experienced since I moved here in 1986 has been great. And Dr.Monika Setia is going to talk about the 5 steps, that one should take to get into this PhD programs in the United States. I am pretty sure Dr. Setia is going to say her own personal experiences, while she was a graduate student here, and would take us, into the rich Fulbright program. And it's a fantastic program, and which was initiated, as I remember, in 1950, I think. And it's a fantastic program, that's going to be very helpful for our students, not only students, masters, doctoral students, pre-doctoral students, postdoctoral fellowships, faculty, administrative colleagues. A number of things can be done, through the help of the Fulbright mechanism. And that's where I will stop. Dr. Setia, it's left to you now to go ahead and present, let us know about, these programs, why they are important, especially for Indians, within the context of the binational collaborative infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Ravi, for that background and setting the stage. And thank you so much, Dr. Dean, for the introduction. Really, it's a pleasure and honor for us to be participating in this conference today. And I just want to clarify before we begin that we're going to be talking about the Fulbright programs tomorrow. And we have another session scheduled at 11 a.m. tomorrow, I think 11 or 11:15. And in today's session, we're going to focus just on the direct admissions to PhD programs in the United States without the support of the Fulbright programs. Fulbright programs, in fact, do not support admission to PhD programs in the United States. There is a doctoral program, but that's more geared towards students who are already enrolled for a PhD program in India. So I just want to have the clarification. So for those of you who are looking for Fulbright programs and applying to the fellowships, do connect with us again tomorrow. We will be talking in detail about the various grant opportunities available through the Fulbright programs for Indian citizens. So today we will be talking, as I mentioned, and as Dr. Ravi said, about the 5 steps to PhD programs in the United States. As you know, as Dr. Dean mentioned in the introduction, and Professor Ravi mentioned also, I pursued my PhD program in the US. I would also like to introduce our team members here. 2 of our team members from the office are joining us. Ms. Nireen Raikhan, who's the Education USA advisor at our office, and Ms. Pranita Hemant, who's the Education USA and Administrative Coordinator. We will join again tomorrow, Pranita and myself, for the Fulbright programs, because we take care of the Fulbright programs. Thank you so much, Marine and Pranita, for joining us. So with that, I would like to get started. I will try to rush up things because it's a longer presentation, but then I totally understand the time constraints. So let me share. Oh, I think I can't share my screen. So if somebody can make me a co-host, I think that would be helpful. And I just request all the participants to keep their questions, ready by the end of the presentation. I just prefer. Oops, I'm sorry. I said that I request all the participants to please list down the questions and answers when we're doing the presentation. Once I've finished the presentation, we will open the platform for Q&A part for all the audience members. So do keep your questions ready for the end. Should I try?
Madam, you are made co-host, so you can share your screen.
Sure, thank you. Okay, I think you should be able to see my screen now. So as I said, the title of the presentation today is your 5 steps to PhD programs in the United States. Before I move ahead with the presentation, I would just like to briefly introduce the organization, which is United States India Educational Foundation, which is, the program, the organization that hosts the Fulbright Commission, the presentation that we're going to make tomorrow. We also, we are a binational body supported by 2 governments, Indian government and the American government. And the organization was established in February of 1950. So last year we completed our 70 years. And USIEF's activities can be broadly categorized into 4 major heads. The first one being the administration of the Fulbright, Nehru and other Fulbright fellowships, both for Indian and American citizens. And that's why USIEF is also the Fulbright Commission in India. And this is the program about which we're going to talk tomorrow, as I mentioned earlier. As a result of these Fulbright exchange programs, there is a lot of dialogue which is needed among the Fulbrighters in the communities. So we do act as an entity that promotes these dialogues that have resulted as due to this educational and cultural exchange. The third piece of our activity is the Education USA program, under which we're going to do the presentation today. Education USA primarily is a US State Department program that's designed to provide advising services to students who are interested in pursuing their higher education in the United States. It could be at any level, be it after 12th standard for the bachelor's or undergrad programs, or after bachelor's for master's, or after master's for PhD programs. We do also serve as a resource to foster linkages between Indian and American institutions of higher education. This is done through various Fulbright umbrella of programs or even otherwise. So this is a brief introduction about USIEF, and I would like to move now quickly to the core presentation, which is on the 5 steps to PhD programs, which I mentioned is a part of our work for the Education USA advising services that USIEF offers in India. Education USA, what we generally call it as an official source of information on US higher education. I'm sure many of the students who are joining us today, they have tried to go online, find information about how to apply for PhD programs or master's programs if you applied earlier, and then maybe came out confused as to what you're reading, what you're listening. Is that really authentic? Is that really current information? Is that unbiased information? So given all those concerns of the international students, US Department of State designed the Education USA program, and that's why we call it official. So it's a program that's supported by the US State Department, providing accurate, comprehensive, and current information to the students who are looking to pursue their higher education in the United States. It's a wide network that's spread across 170 plus countries through 430 plus centers, with 8 centers existing in India in the cities of Ahmedabad, Bangalore, Chennai, Hyderabad, 2 centers in Hyderabad, Kolkata, Mumbai, and New Delhi. So wherever the students are joining us from across India, you can connect with your nearest center. We will share the information about these centers at the end of the presentation. What Education USA does is it divides the whole process of the US university applications into 5 easy steps. Step 1 being researching your options, step 2 financing your studies, step 3 completing your application, step 4 applying for your student visa, and step 5 preparing for your departure. What we will do is we will cover these 5 steps today related to the PhD program applications in the United States. And that's why the title of the presentation, 5 steps. A little basics on on the US higher education system before we move on to the 5 steps. There are different types of institutions and degree programs offered in the US university system. There are different intakes, spring and fall being the most common intake. I would say within spring and fall, also fall is the most common intake. Fall is the intake, that is the admission or the program start date that coincides with August or September every year, which is very similar to the Indian higher education system. And spring coincides with the January or February intake. Sometimes spring is also called the winter intake in some institutions. Most commonly, PhD students would be going for fall intake, but not necessarily. Sometimes even students are taken in for the spring intake. So it depends. There are different types of institutions in the US. The most prominent distinction, may I request everybody to please go on mute. There is a lot of background noise that's coming. So if you're on unmute, request you to please mute yourself. I don't want to take the names. I can see the names on the screen, but if you can please mute yourself. Largely, there are public and private institutions in the United States. And in terms of the graduate study, which is, I would like to mention here the distinction. So if you go for your higher education after your 12th standard, that's prominently demarcated as undergraduate study. What we call in India the bachelor's programs, but there are other types of programs also, undergraduate programs in the US. Graduate studies what refers to what you pursue after your bachelor's programs, which is master's or PhD, or as I've listed down there, integrated master's and PhD. So today's session is going to focus on the doctoral programs, because what we knew from the background is that a lot of master's students are attending the conference and they'll be interested in knowing more about the doctoral program admissions in the United States. A little bit on the background of the doctoral programs. Prominently, what you hear most commonly is about the PhD programs, which stands for Doctor of Philosophy. It's the most common degree at the doctoral level that's offered in different academic disciplines. And the idea behind PhD programs is to design, to train research scholars, somebody who's well versed with the research, the stream of research in their respective discipline. However, there are also professional doctorate programs in the US, which they generally lead to a licensure in the specialized field. So, for example, if you look at the field of law, there is a Juris Doctorate, medicine, MD program, education, EdD, public health, DRPH, Doctor of Business, administration, DBA. I haven't heard yet for anything in the field of anthropology, but maybe I'll refer to Dr. Dean or Professor Ravi to elaborate if there is any such professional doctorate program. I bet not, but if there is, I would invite them to share that information with the audience. But there are professional, and within anthropology, as you know, I mean, anthropology itself, comes from various disciplines. So within that, if you're interested in doing a more professional doctoral program, you have many options there, but leading more for a practitioner side of things rather than a researcher. The focus of our session today is more going to be on the PhD programs, because we know this is a research conference and a lot of students, they look forward to a PhD program admission in the United States. As I mentioned earlier, there are also integrated programs which are generally open to students after they've completed their 4-year bachelor's program in India, and they are generally of the longer duration compared to a PhD or a professional doctorate. PhD programs are generally of average 5 years duration in the United States. Professional doctoral programs could be slightly shorter, 3 or 4 years, depends on the discipline to which you're applying. Little bit on the eligibility to apply for PhD programs. So master's degree may or may not be mandatory to apply for a PhD program. Candidates with even a 4-year bachelor's program are sometimes eligible, not always, at most of the US universities, but always you have to check with the requirements of the US institution. Also, a lot depends on what your profile is and what you did during those 4 years. If you were involved in research, did some projects, build a research profile, then you may be considered for the direct PhD admission after the 4-year bachelor's program. However, I do understand that in anthropology, most of the times the programs in India in the related disciplines are of 3 years. So in which case you should be completing a master's degree and then applying for the PhD programs. The universities, as I mentioned earlier, may require applicants to have a research or a professional experience in the field of study. And in your case, being from the field, it will be good to have some kind of anthropology experience. And it's great that you all are attending the conference today and tomorrow, because that is, the first step towards learning research, attending a conference, listening to the ACE researchers, and then maybe presenting in future, small posters, doing poster sessions or smaller research projects that you can present in the students, side of the conference. There are different streams, as you know, at the conference. So those are the things that count towards a research experience as a student when you're applying for PhD programs in the US. PhD programs, do remember that they are designed to certify that a student has demonstrated their capacity as a trained research scholar in the specific discipline, in your case, anthropology or a subfield of anthropology. So it is expected that during the PhD program, a PhD student completes an original piece of significant research, which is through a dissertation that describes that research, and then you successfully defend your work before a panel of research experts, which is prominently your PhD committee, but also there are external members and audience who are invited when you're doing your final defense related to your discipline. In terms of the structure of the PhD program, you should have that clear understanding before you start applying for the PhD programs, that the duration of a PhD program in the United States is somewhere between 5 to 8 years. As I earlier said, around 5 years or an average of 5 years is what it generally takes the students, but there is a variation and a lot depends on the field of study. Also remember that there are 4 semesters or around 2 years of coursework that's mostly mandatory at most of the US institutions, with the additional 2 or 3 years of research work, which leads to the completion of the dissertation. There are a few benchmarks in a PhD program in the in the United States, and there are always slight variations across universities, even within universities, across departments or programs of study. But generally, a PhD student is supposed to go through a candidacy exam at the end of first year, which is predominantly an exam based on the coursework that they've completed in the first year, and then a comprehensive exam at around the end of second year, which assesses their research capability based on whatever understanding they've built in the first and second year. Then you have to present a proposal, which is a thesis proposal for your PhD research work, and finally do the final dissertation defense at the end of your 5th year. As I said, each university and program follows a slightly modified version of this assessment process, but it is good for all of you to be aware that what you're getting into before you start applying for the PhD programs. So now getting onto the 5 steps of the PhD program. You might have now understood what the PhD programs in general look like in US. If you're all set, then let's understand the process for applications to PhD programs in the United States. We're going to go step by step to these 5 steps. The first step being researching your options. Ideally, this step should start around 12 to 18 months prior to the program start date. So if you're in your first year of master's program, that's the right time to start thinking about the PhD admissions. If you're already in your second year, that's okay too, but ideal is the first year. The culmination point of this step, which is researching your options, is a short list of universities. So identify the institutions and programs of study where you would like to submit your application. Here, it is very important that you start by defining your priorities. So identify the area of research. And anthropology as a subject area is very broad. So you will have to narrow down within anthropology to specific areas, not only specific areas, the sub areas. Nobody is asking you to identify a PhD dissertation topic. That's not expected at this stage. At this stage, the idea is for you to be able to, may I request everybody to please go on mute. There's still a background noise that's coming. So at this stage, it's very important that through reading journal articles, you try to identify an area of research which you would like to pursue as part of your PhD program. And once you have identified this area, it is now important that to try to research and find those universities, departments, centers that are, and professors who are conducting research most relevant to your area of interest that you have found after that introspection. And it is really great. These conferences are a great place to meet professors, to identify those individuals who are working in those narrow areas where you want to focus on your PhD. And those are great platforms to even meet, these not only meet the professors, but also in fact refine your ideas, because you might have certain idea about your research, but when you go go out and listen to these senior researchers when you're attending conferences, that allows you to further refine what is it that you really want to do within that broader area, or maybe a finer tuning of the topic that you have identified for yourself. When you're doing your research, visiting university website, department website, center websites, it is very, very important, to access the right websites. You cannot just go randomly on Google and try to find institutions. So at Education USA, we have identified certain websites that are authentic. You can always write to our office if you need more information or want to get access to these websites. We'll be happy to provide you these. You can take a screenshot if you want, but these are some good websites that you can access to find these institutions that offer a PhD program in the relevant area. Anthropology more broadly, but then within the anthropology area also, the sub areas that you might be looking to research on. Always look up information on the department or research center webpage. Don't go very broadly and find something generic on the Google or any common open platforms. What department shares or research center shares is the most authentic information. Try to identify professors. As a PhD student, you're always working with this one PhD advisor. Of course, there's a committee, but your advisor, PhD advisor, is the key person who's deeply involved with you in your PhD programs. Try to identify that professor or a few professors who are potential advisors for you before you apply for the PhD program. And there are many ways to do it. There are many times professional mailing lists available, professional conferences like the one that you're attending today. Always check out with your colleagues and research advisor at the master's level. If they have any connections in the US universities, they can refer you to these people who are working in similar areas or same area of research. Finally, you all read journal articles or research articles. You read those articles, and after reading them, you definitely know this is the person or these are the few people you want to work with. The authors are listed there and also is their affiliation. So it's very easy to make those inroads, write to them. US University professors are very prompt in replying to students, and they really look forward to working with good PhD students. So if you have that profile, you have that interest, your research area matches with what professor is doing, it is much easier to make that connection if you have the credential and make your inroads into that PhD program. Third very important thing, once you have done, when you're doing the research and looking up university department websites, keep on checking what are the requirements for admissions for the international students in the PhD programs. Generally, the department or college webpage, and there is something called the graduate school website. Those are the two good places where you should be looking at that requirement. There are many requirements for international students, as we will see when we talk about the application component in terms of English proficiency scores or what's required in terms of the GPA, that is the percentage. So those kind of things should be clear to you before you shortlist that institution. One thing is for you to identify the research area, but another thing is what is the admission criteria at that particular institution. There are minimum English proficiency scores that are required from the international students, also a minimum GPA or a percentage. There might be requirements for a GRE score. So all those things should be understood well before you shortlist that institution. In most cases, PhD programs at US universities are fully funded, but I would not say that they're fully funded unconditionally. You always have to perform, showcase every year that you have met a certain criteria. For example, when you're taking your coursework, you have to maintain a certain GPA to be allowed to have continued funding. Also, you may have some work requirements. You have to go through, remember I told you about the 4 general criteria that a PhD benchmarks that the PhD students go through in terms of clearing the candidacy exam, the comprehensive exam, the thesis proposal defense. All those things have to be completed with the criteria the university has mentioned to be able to have that full funding criteria by the program, either department or the university. But it is very important that you keep up with your work and also check beforehand if the department or the institution is offering funding support to PhD students that are applying from the international locations. So these are some of the things that you should be aware of when you are doing your research. Another important aspect is some factors that you should keep in mind when you're trying to find that best fit program. You may have some seniors who have already gone to pursue their PhD in the US, or even your friends or family members, and they may refer you to certain programs, but those may not be necessarily the best fit for you. So it is important that you identify the best fit program for yourself. And for that, you should keep certain criteria in mind that we've listed here. For example, the degree or field of study, accreditation. Programs have to be accredited, and you can easily find these accreditation status of the program and the institution on the US Department of Education website. Certain students are very interested in understanding the acceptance rate as to of the number of applications received by an institution, how many really got accepted at the institution. This is more relevant at the master's level, but sometimes even at the PhD level. The size of the institution and the department also matters. For PhD students, they generally like to be in smaller size departments because then there's more focus. It's easy to interact with faculty and your peer group and learn, from your postdocs, from the PhD students, from your faculty, but it depends. You may want to be in a bigger department too. Faculty profile for PhD students is very, very important. Your research area should very well match with what the faculty are pursuing in terms of research projects and research grants. There's somebody again who has gone on unmute, and there's a lot of noise. Please mute yourself. There is the cost and financial aid is important because it's a long 5-year program. So is there financial aid available for PhD students in that particular department? Research facilities and research training opportunities are very important. So you should be looking at what kind of lab facilities are available, what kind of opportunities are available. Is there any funding support to attend conferences for students? Are there any in-house conferences happening at the university where students can present? There are many aspects which are available easily on the university websites or department websites. Sometimes geographic location is important to students in terms of maybe weather, if they want to be in a don't want to be in a too cold or too hot place. Housing for graduate students is generally off campus. There is limited housing for graduate students on campus. But these are some of the additional factors you should be aware of, like campus setting, climate. International student services are very important. You being international students, you'll always end up, going to the international students office and getting some help or the other related to your visa, your training opportunities outside the campus, or even social and cultural support. So be aware, of some of these factors when you are researching the US university websites and looking at the programs of study. Some of the questions you can ask before choosing the program is, how many students in the Department of Planning is the department planning to accept? Are most of the faculty doing active research? Are there places for you in the lab? Probably in your case, there won't be a lab because you're more from anthropology side. But if there is a research which is more lab oriented in your case, then you may want to check, is there a place for a new PhD student in the lab? How well equipped is the department? Are there any teaching requirements from PhD students? Are there any interdisciplinary centers and how you can collaborate with them? And is there fund providing and for how long? You should also be looking at the advisor, and you can choose a advisor based on their stability in the department. Are they close to retirement, a sabbatical? Then it's going to be a trouble. How compatible they are, both in terms of research and your style of functioning or work. What is the reputation of the scientific reputation of this person whom you're planning to work with, their publications, especially the grad students, how they talk about them. What is the style of the professor in the lab? Do they work in the lab? Do they have individual projects? What is their enthusiasm level, congeniality? These are some of the things you can gauge by talking to them. Funding, very important. Do they have grants? How many grants maybe in the last 5 years? What is the history and how renowned they are in terms of receiving the grants and publications also, and how and where have the past graduate students and postdocs been placed, for that professor. So these are some of the things that you can keep in mind when you're choosing an advisor. And all these things culminate into a research for your PhD programs. That is, with keeping all these factors in mind, you should be identifying a PhD program where you want to consider applying. So you can see how much work goes into it. And that's why you have to give yourself time to do this research, to communicate with the professors, with the department, with the current PhD or the past PhD students or postdocs, and understand what really where the department or the professor stands, and then accordingly choose to that place for your PhD application. Now moving on to the step 2, which is financing your studies, and this should also ideally start around a year before the program start date. This is where you make a plan for your payment. As I mentioned earlier, most of the times in case of PhD students, they're looking for full funding, and many US universities do provide that full funding, but still, you should be aware of certain funding opportunities that are available to the students. As I mentioned earlier, well, I'm not sure if I mentioned earlier, but PhD students do get priority for funding at all universities and departments, but the amount and type of this financial assistance available to the students always varies by department, college, university, the background of the student and their experience, and also the field of study. So it is important for you to understand what the different kinds of financial support that you may apply to, which are all based on merit. So scholarships and fellowships are available by certain US institutions where there is generally no work requirement. So you can, when you're researching your options, you can always look up if there are any kind of scholarships or fellowships available for international students to apply, either generally for the graduate studies or specifically for the PhD programs, and accordingly apply for those fellowships. Also, the other form by which the PhD students get funded is the assistantships. This is how I completed my PhD program for the 5 years that I was at Pennsylvania State University, where I did my PhD program. I was a graduate assistant. So I worked with the department on research and teaching roles. And in lieu of that, you receive a stipend, which is more than enough to sustain yourself on your monthly expenses. And then also you get generally a tuition waiver. This is on-campus work. Remember, as a PhD student who's going to be most commonly on an F1 visa, you're not allowed to work off campus. You're only allowed to work on campus of the university where you're doing your PhD program. And the work hours are limited to 20 hours per week. So within those constraints, even if you work, you get enough stipend to sustain yourself. And if the tuition is waived, you don't have to worry about anything. But it's predominantly research and teaching work, which additionally actually gives you a lot of experience because that adds up to your CV that you've done so much of research or teaching, which comes out of your assistantship. Also, when you're looking up, the college web page, or when you're contacting the department for information on international student funding, always check, the university guides or conference materials and try to seek this information from the professors or the advisors, potential advisors with whom you're communicating. Definitely apply during your application for these funding supports. Sometimes there are applications for funding that are open after admission, but most of the time it is during the application that you will be applying for these funding opportunities. Faculty pages on the department website are a very good resource to look for faculty who do have research grants and may be willing to take you in. But there are these other websites also you can explore besides the university or department websites to look for funding options. And again, if you approach our office, we'd be happy to share these websites through a handout that we have readily available. And you can write to your nearest center and get this information. Always remember, the deadline for financial support is usually earlier than the deadline for regular applications. There's something called a priority application. So generally the deadlines for say the fall admission, which is August, September start date, is around November, December. But if you're looking for priority application, that is if you're looking for funding support, you should be applying around October or November. So apply early. Besides these assistantships and the fellowships and scholarships, there is also something called the OPT and the CPT. OPT stands for optional practical training and CPT for curricular practical training. These are two practical training opportunities that are paid options most of the times, and you can avail them as international students. When you are doing your coursework and you've completed nearly 1 year of your coursework, you're eligible to go for your CPT, which is 20 hours per week during the time of the campus and full time during your vacation time. And this could be on or off campus. Generally, you're working as a TA, RA, or a graduate assistant, but you can also take up some other work outside campus on your CPT. Similarly, for OPT, which is optional practical training, that's that comes into picture after you've completed all requirements of your degree program, and it allows you to work up to 12 months in the area, in the same field in which you pursued your degree program. And this, I know that anthropology is a non-STEM program most of the times, but STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. But if your program by chance falls under the STEM field, depending on the nature of the program, then your OPT may be extended for up to 36 months. Do remember that you cannot yourself go and start to work on CPT and OPT. You have to take permission from the immigration authorities in the United States. So you should always approach your international students office to get the paperwork done before you can start anything related to your OPT and CPT. Generally, US universities do many sessions related to OPT and CPT on campus. Attend those sessions and know more details about them through those sessions offered by the local international students or the what we call the DSO office, designated school official. Now, once you have the funding sorted out, you have to start working also on the step 3, which is the core part, completing your application. This also should be given at least a year. And there are different components of an application package for PhD programs, which is a combination of quantitative and qualitative elements. And when I say quantitative elements, I mean the scores. So for example, your percentage or your mark sheets, your standardized test score like a GRE, or your English proficiency score like a TOEFL or IELTS, and then your qualitative elements, which is, for example, the statement of purpose, letters of recommendations, your resume or curriculum vitae, and other kind of documents, which are all listed here. So you start with an application form, which is generally online, and then you have these other components that you finish. Let's quickly go through each of these components. I will be very quick in interest of time. So standardized test scores, these are required both for admission and financial aid consideration. The average score generally varies by university and programs of study. More competitive schools generally have high score requirements. Generally, there is a requirement for GRE, either a GRE general test or both a general test and a subject test. For PhD programs in business or management, I know that we may not have those students joining us today, but GMAT score is something which is generally mandated. Given the pandemic situation, many universities and programs have gone test optional, that is, they may not require a GRE or GMAT, but always have a close look. That's not always the case. So if the program to which you're applying, they do require a GRE, then do prepare for it, register for the test, and do send your scores. Check, as I said, check the university to understand if they require the test, and accordingly prepare and register. These tests are generally taken at designated test centers, but are also now available in the home-based mode for all these tests, GRE and GMAT both. English proficiency is a must for international students, and this is again considered both for admission and financial support, especially if you're being considered for teaching assistantship. Your English proficiency scores are very, very important. You have different options among TOEFL, IELTS, PTE, but you always have to check the US university website to which you're applying. What is it that they accept? Not every university is going to accept all scores, but scores for all these 3 tests, once taken, are valid for 2 years. So if you've taken tests, suppose this year, and you're applying next year, your scores still will be valid. Always check the application instructions, as I mentioned, to understand what test is accepted. Generally, a strong English proficiency score is required at US universities, would have set a minimum admission criteria and also for funding standards. And it is always your responsibility to send these scores to the institution. So don't think that you've administered the test, it's done deal. You have to make sure that your test scores are sent to the university where you're submitting your application. Your statement of purpose is the next very important piece of your application, which allows an admission committee to assess what are your research capabilities, your goals, why you have chosen to apply in this particular field, what is your ability to contribute to the research that's ongoing in the department, what are your writing skills, your academic capability, and your purpose to apply for this particular program at that university. So in an SOP, it is important that you highlight your research objective, what is your education, what is your work background, why did you choose to work in this, pursue research in this particular field of study, and why did you choose to apply to this particular department or university? What are the research projects that you've done so far, and what kind of skills you developed out of those research projects? What are your accomplishments so far? What extracurricular activities you've done, any trainings and workshops you've gone through, and any other factors that you think the admissions committee should know that will help them understand how you're going to succeed in the program. So SOP is a very, very critical piece of a PhD application package, and you should write a non-plagiarized SOP. We see a lot of students coming in, copy pasting things from online. Never do that. It's very easy for the admissions committee to read an SOP and understand if the student themselves has written it or it's taken from somewhere else. So be authentic, write your own thoughts from your heart and your mind, and work out your SOP. What are transcripts and letters of recommendations? Transcript is basically your mark sheets sent in a certain manner. These have to be in English, and they should carry the seal and stamp of the college or university from where you pursued your master's and bachelor's. Always remember that for PhD applications, record from each year of your bachelor's and master's is required. If you've not done your master's yet and you're applying after the bachelor's program, that only bachelor's. But if you've done or doing your master's, then both bachelor's and master's transcripts are required. They should be just scanned and uploaded. You don't need to send the hard copies. You submit it with the online application form. Always start the process a few months in advance, because it takes time to get these transcripts from the university. Letters of recommendation or letters of support or reference letters, as they're called, they're a very critical component, because these are a third party description of who you are to understand your potential. So generally it's your professors who write these letters of recommendations. 2 or 3 LORs are generally required. They can be either taken from an academic or professional contact, but always include a letter from your thesis guide if you're in a master's program. So this completes, all the components of your PhD application package. In some cases, there may be an additional requirement for, say, a proof of research capability, or there will be a separate form where you have to request for financial assistance, or they may interview you for the PhD program. So every program is going to be different. So closely look at what is the application requirement. Once you have submitted your applications, which are generally, as I said, submitted somewhere between October and November for priority applications, and between December, Jan, and Feb, sometimes even nowadays March, for the regular applications. But you should start hearing about your results by April, May for the admissions. Once you have received admissions, now the next important step is for you to apply for your visa, which is generally 3 to 5 months before the program start date. What you have to do is, once you've accepted the offer, the selected institution may require you to fill out certain forms if you have been granted financial assistance, and then based on that they will give you something called an I-20 document, which is to be used to prepare for your visa application. We are not going to discuss this step in detail, because we offer the student visa information sessions along with the visa officers at the US Embassy and the consulates. So when you are at that stage, just follow our social media handles and you know about when these sessions are being offered. So attend those sessions and listen from the visa officer themselves, both about the application and the interview process. Once you have received your visa, it's very important that you're prepared for your departure, which is the step 5 of the 5-step process, where you get organized, put together all your documents which are to be taken along to the US, your passport, your visa, sometimes your original mark sheets, because the US university may want to verify your transcripts. You have to arrange for your accommodation, make your travel plans. Also, an important component is for you to understand how the US higher education system is different from what you're going through right now in India. There are many pieces that are critically different, especially when it comes to the classroom interactions, how the professors teach the students, what's expected out of the students in terms of class interaction, what is office hours, who are teaching the systems. There are many new things which will come your way when you start your PhD programs in the US. So what we do is we organize something called a pre-departure orientation program. These are virtual right now since the pandemic started, but they used to be in person. And you should attend one of these to listen from the alumni of US institutions, US universities, Education USA advisors, and also we invite the officers from the US Embassy and the consulates to talk about their experiences from the US higher education system. Many pieces are discussed, for especially research is very, very different. Plagiarism is an important aspect, how you should be looking at research when you go there as a PhD student. So many of these aspects are talked about in the pre-departure orientation programs that we conduct and offer. So do attend one of these when you are at that stage. And that completes the 5 steps to PhD, application process to the US universities. Very little about how, if you have further questions, how you can keep connected with our offices, because I'm very sure once you start working on your applications, there'll be hundreds of questions that will come to your mind. Right now, we're offering everything virtually, so that's a great thing. You can always connect with our office through different means and ways. We will share with you our phone number, but we do offer a lot of virtual sessions. We are on all social media platforms. So you can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. We have a rich YouTube channel. Just go and find out Education USA India, and you will be able to find tons of information on the YouTube channel. And then we do all announcements on our Facebook handles. There is a calendar that we have, and all this information can be found also on our website. There is a calendar where we announce all our upcoming events. You can also sign up to receive information from our centers through a newsletter. So in case you want to do that, what we can do is after this, or I request Marine, if you can share in the chat box these 2 links with the students, the sign up link and the India calendar link, so that students have it easy and they can access it. We have a toll-free line that you can call anytime, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. We do offer a lot of sessions every day, every week. Attend those. A lot of information sessions with US institutions, alumni, visa officers. We do have memberships in case somebody needs more handholding, but otherwise our advisors are available free of cost to anybody who has a question. We do have a wonderful mobile app. You can download it from both the iOS platform and the Google Play Store. And that has, again, a lot of information related to US higher education and how you can apply to US universities. And finally, this is a screen which I mentioned earlier, where you can get contact information for all our centers. These are all our centers. The phone numbers, email IDs are available. We are also on WhatsApp. We are talking to you from the USIEF's Hyderabad Center, which is based at the US Consulate in Hyderabad. But feel free to connect if you are from another city with the center that's nearest to you. And I think I would just leave the screen on while we do the Q&A. But I hope this helps, and this just opens up a platform for all of you to start thinking about the PhD programs and start working on your applications. Over to you, Professor Ravi. Thank you so much.
That's fantastic, ma'am. It's a very nice review of each and every component of the PhD programs in the US. The only thing is that, tomorrow, Ms. Pranita Hemant will be talking about the PhD programs as they correspond to the Fulbright mechanisms. They are slightly different, right?
So, Professor Ravi, tomorrow, actually, we will be talking general about the Fulbright programs. And Pranita and myself both will be delivering the talk tomorrow.
Okay.
That is going to be both for, faculty and students and research scholars, because there are different types of Fulbright programs that are available. So we will talk about those definitely tomorrow, all of the programs. Yeah.
That's fantastic. And Dr. Sirajuddin is there. And he was at our University of Kansas as a Fulbright visiting scholar. Maybe we should also hear from him, Dr. Sirajuddin.
Yes. Am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes.
Well, first of all, thank you very much to Monika Setia for a very vivid description about the 5 steps. I just missed in the very beginning. I was a bit occupied. And I want to thank you for giving a very broad overview about the whole process. Actually, I'm an old hand. I was a beneficiary of this Fulbright postdoc program in 92-93. And I had a great opportunity to interact with Professor Ravi Duggrala and Professor Bartholomew. Dean, I don't remember actually, because in those days I was a physical anthropologist. I don't know because coming into contact with him. Anyway, it was a very nice having a chat with him and then having a perspective from his point of view. Ma'am, I just, in the very beginning of your lecture, I came to know that in the end, you were telling that you are going to talk in detail about the different kinds of programs tomorrow. But as a beneficiary of this thing, I have got some few inputs which I thought that if I give it to you, maybe it will be helpful. In those days, it was almost like 92, 93 means it is like some 28 years before. I was a postdoc of this Fulbright scholarship program. And, I would have been greatly benefited if this type of a social media and interaction program would have been conducted in those days. The selection process in those days was first at the regional level, then at the national level, and then it was a very rigorous program, and it is one of the very prestigious program. My point of view here is it choosing your advisor, choosing your department was a very difficult in those days because we have to go to USI's library there, consulate library, go through all the process because online nothing was available in those days there. Until and unless you land into the department, you don't know actually what are the facilities available there, what is the background of your advisor. Of course, you get a letter from him and you choose him based on his curriculum vitae and all those things there. And second thing, which this thing, it would have been greatly benefited. And this thing should be the input for the Fulbright aspirants from USIEF. And another thing is, I came to know that here in India, we call it as a Fulbright scholarship program. Once you land into, you may be also know, you know about it. In USA, they call it as a USAID program. It was. I don't know whether it is the case there. They call it as a USAID takes over. From here, it is Fulbright, but there, once you land in USA, it is a USAID which takes over the processing and then taking care of your needs and travel, grants, your sponsorship, etc., etc. So this has to be clarified to the Fulbright aspirant. The second point, what in the very beginning you were telling that there is no hardcore rule saying that there should be some slots for anthropology students, either at the postgraduate level or for the postdoc level. But I sincerely request that you should make it, because it is such a comprehensive, holistic discipline, anthropology. It has got both lab side and then for physical anthropologists and for the social anthropologists, of course, it is a matured based on the advisor. I suggest that there should be definitely every year there should be a slot for anthropology discipline as such in the Fulbright program. These are the few comments. I think there must be other. Bartholomew can add more about it because I was in 92, 93 interactive with Professor Crawford, M.H. Crawford. He was a giant in anthropology in those days there. We had a good opportunity of talking, learning a lot with Professor Ravi. We had a giant paper, in fact, with Professor Crawford and Professor Ravi, and Bartholomew also must be there viewing us. Maybe he must be wondering who is this chap now talking to me. Thank you very much, Monika Setia.
I also wanted to thank particularly Dr. Satia for giving an excellent presentation from the point of view of how one does an effective application to enter graduate school. As a former director of graduate studies, I've received many applications that I wonder what went on. And I think that you've said a few things, and coming back to the excellent comments that we've just heard. 10, 20 years ago, it was very difficult to be in touch with advisors. And I would encourage those who want to study, send an email. If the individual doesn't respond, that is indicative of something. Perhaps they would be a bad advisor. So that establishing those contacts and knowing who you're dealing with. And I like the fact that you were giving a time frame of 12, 18 months, which isn't, it's not effective when I get something a week before the application is due and one knows that they're simply cutting and pasting and putting Bartholomew C. Dean, and then they take it directly off the web page or whatever, because too much reading the web page isn't necessarily a good thing. It's a good starting point, but then one needs to, as you indicate, know a bit about the research and persuade the person who will be your advisor that you're going to take that person on. And and then the other thing I think that is really critical is the money component. I think the reality is that all of us would love to go to the best university, but the US government doesn't have the funds to do that. So they're more likely to send them to a cost-effective university. And that's another component that, because my understanding currently is that a student has to have a list of, say, 5 or 10 universities, and they don't necessarily get the one they want, let's say. So it would be wise to spread your net widely and do your research. So, but again, thank you, and thanks to those who have joined, and I'll try to be quiet.
Fantastic.
so much.
Do we have a 5 minutes time? I would like to re-emphasize, some of the things that have been discussed by Dr. Setia and Dr. Sirajuddin and Dr. Dean. I know you have touched very important. Choosing advisor is very, very, very important. One of the students that I know had a difficulty with the advisor in the 4th year of her PhD program. And she had to discontinue the entire program after 4 years of her solid work. So that is very, very important, to be able to see who the advisor, whom you are going to choose as your advisor. What is the advisor's background? That's very, very important. Next thing is, research topics for anthropology people, you should be very, very careful. Sometimes anthropological investigations, they involve field work. So where is the field work going to be done? Is it going to be done in the US or in India? Are there facilities, to do research work, in India? So one should be very, very careful about choosing their topic too. And when it comes to funding, there are 2 types of funding. Students get a TA and RA. Sometimes their tuition fees, they are covered. RA, you should be very, very careful about, what kind of program, the advisor has, how much money they can pump in, into the, stipends or, whatever it is, that kind of support, one should be very, very careful about those things also, And when you talked about the STEM program, as Dr. Sirajuddin said, several of the biological anthropology fields, like anthropological genetics, forensic anthropology, molecular genetics, all of them come under, and the bioinformatics part of it, comes under technology. So there are certain fields within anthropology that would make a candidate, suitable for the STEM program, So those are the things I wanted to add,
Thank you so much, Professor Ravi, for those clarifications. And I just want to clarify on a few points. Thank you, Dr. Dean, for those additional points. I totally, agree. And thank you, Ravi, Dr. Ravi, for adding those things about specifically to the anthropology field. Dr. Sirajuddin, I just want to, clarify on a few things. Anthropology is, in fact, a field of study under Fulbright, scholarships. So we don't have seats that are demarcated, but as you know, Fulbright has limited fields, that for which the applications are accepted, and anthropology is a field of study under the Fulbright fellowships. So, that is the status which, the Fulbright Commission has given to anthropology. We cannot demarcate seats because, as you know, Fulbright fellowships are competitive. So it's always, the best applications have to go through irrespective of the field of study. But as you know, we have a lot of anthropologists, yourself, you got selected 20 years ago, but then we every year or every other year we have a few anthropologists who get selected for the programs. So I'd really encourage, all of you attending today, that tomorrow's session, when myself and Pranita, we talk about the Fulbright fellowships, those are very, lucrative, I would say. And definitely, I think Dr. Sirajuddin can, share also that how it really leads to a lot of professional development and personal development, the program programs in terms of that exchange program, and also how it builds, a good career for you for the lifetime. There are many things which come along with the Fulbright programs. So really encourage all of you to attend tomorrow's session. And Dr. Sirajuddin, now, I'm not sure what happened 20 years ago, because I joined the Fulbright office 4 years ago, but there is no such requirement now for them to go through another agency. USIEF takes care of things in India, and then IIE, which is the International Institute of Education, they have their branch offices, and their officers take care of the Fulbright scholars when they are in the United States. So it is not an issue at all now. Things have changed, I'm very sure, in 20 years. When you went, less technology was available. Internet was not so easily available. So it's very easy nowadays for scholars to identify and reach out to the US departments and researchers with whom they want to work. Things are changing, and as I said, US, and Dr. Dean can also vouch for it, Dr. Ravi can share, US universities, professors, researchers, they're very prompt in their reply. They look forward to hosting Fulbright scholars. That's what our experience has been. So I think I'm sure that nowadays the scholars have a different experience compared to what you had. But we will take your suggestions, share it with the Fulbright office definitely. And if there are other suggestions, do let us know. We'll be happy to take them back to our head office in New Delhi.
Pardon me, and just to finalize what you just said, when the University of Kansas receives an applicant that has a Fulbright, we as a group know that they're A+, so that we say they come with money, so to speak, and so we are much more likely to kick in, so to speak, and the crème de la crème. So it's for us, it's delight. It's a great honor, and so I just wanted to say that, and so I think that my university sees it in a very positive light.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And
If
I do
there are
see
any
there are
students.
sorry.
Yeah, please go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I see there are some audience members who are sitting in the conference hall in case they had any questions. I see a good number of students who are sitting in the conference room. So in case they have any questions, they can come up and ask.
There are some students, maybe any questions from student side? Okay, we have our vice president wants to ask one question.
Yeah.
Dr. Ananda.
Soumya, your presentation was an excellent, and we have been educated how we get. Sorry, your name is Monica.
That's okay.
Yeah, your presentation, even I have been educated. Earlier, I don't know what is Fulbright scholarship, but you educated me along with my all students.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
My question is that you mentioned that scoring, that TOEFL and IELTS, what is the minimum scoring, so that our students can be able to prepare and to get the minimum score to get into admission. Another question, see, you are giving the Fulbright scholarship only for students and faculty. What about the senior citizens? Can you see why I am asking this question? Senior citizens means they are already retired. Most of them, they are retired. See, once they retired, they have well knowledge and well experience. If their experiences, it will be useful for making of policies for development of the nation and around the world. This is my suggestion and questions.
Thank you so much, sir, for those two questions and for the question and the comment. So I'll first answer your question related to the English proficiency scores, which is the IELTS or the TOEFL. So every institution in the US has a different level that they set for the English proficiency scores. So it depends on what is the institution student has selected for their application. So if they know or they've already given their score for English proficiency like IELTS or TOEFL, depending on their score, they can select the institution, or they can prepare themselves better if they want to apply to a institution that has the highest requirement. So English proficiency scores varies a lot across. There are 4,600 institutions in the US, so it is very hard for us to keep a track of what each one of them is requiring, but we ask the students to check on that requirement when they're shortlisting. In terms of the Fulbright fellowships, so as you know, the Fulbright programs have been designed, and we will talk about it tomorrow, when we talk in detail about these fellowships. fellowships. Today, we did not get into any details of the Fulbright programs. Tomorrow, when we'll talk, you will see that the idea behind Fulbright fellowships is for the scholars to go through the exchange program, come back and contribute to the community, contribute to the field of study in which they're working, contribute to national development. So in case, even if you're retired and if you're involved in something meaningful and substantial, then you can consider applying for a program that fits your role. We have seen scholars who are about to retire, but they shared very good plans, of how they want to or plan to continue their work after returning back to India. So it totally depends on what is your plan. So if you're retiring, you're not going to be with the institution where you're employed, but maybe you have other ways you're going to contribute to your field, to the institution, or to the community in general. So you can consider applying. For the senior scholars, we will talk about it tomorrow, senior administrators. We do have a special program called International Education Administrator Seminar, as part of which you can go just for a 2-week visit to the US, get that exposure of the US higher education system, come back and implement those kind of learnings on the administrative side at your institution. So there are multiple programs. If you have a plan, you have a strong reason of why you're applying and how you're going to contribute, Fulbright will take cognizance of all those things. So there's nothing a closed chapter for anybody, as we say, and there is no age limit. There's no age limit to applying for Fulbright programs. Young or old really doesn't matter. Yeah.
That's excellent. That's excellent. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. And Dr. Dean, there is a question from Mr. Mude Naresh Naik. The question is, what are the benefits of social anthropology? Would you be willing to answer that? What are the benefits of social anthropology?
Sir, our time is up. Our time is up. Sorry, Chairman. Sorry, excuse me, forgive me. And
Okay.
I request the chairman to stop, and we will give the email of the chairman to the person who posed the question, so that he will proceed for the discussion. Please forgive me for, I request the chair. I request the chair to finish the session.
I would like to thank everybody, in particular, Dr. Monika Setia, as well as Dr. Ravi Duggrala, for joining us, as well as all of our attendants, and for participating in a very stimulating talk. Good afternoon, and look forward to seeing you at the rest of the conference. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Good night. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Bhatt.
And finally, I look forward to responding to the question tomorrow. Gives me more time to think. More time to think. It was a trick question.
You can post your email ID in the message, so that the person will be in touch with you.
Absolutely.
Nice meeting you, Dr. Monika Setia. It's fantastic meeting you, and it was fantastic, all
Thank
the
you.
program.
Thank you so much,
Sure.
Professor Ravi, and I really want to thank the conference organizers, the committee, the American Corner. I know Dr. Cho is not here, but Dr. Joe Christopher for the introductions, and everybody at Andhra University, and whoever is involved in making this thing happen. I think it's really honor and pleasure for the whole of our team who's here, not in front of the camera. I'm just the one on the camera, but really thank you on behalf of us, all of us here, for the
Thank you. Thank you very much to you and Dr. Satyapal, Dr. Ananda, and Dr. Pedrataya. Fantastic job. Thank you so much.
Thank
And
you.
Dr. Siraj,
Thank you, Dr. Monika. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you,
Monika.
colleagues.
Thank you so much.
And thanks
I'm
to
going
all the audience members.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm
you.
ending this meeting.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so
wonderful.
much.
Thank you.